Welcome to the Where Humanity Meets Technology podcast.
Your company is forever going to be at risk.
Cybersecurity does impact us all.
That is the way cybersecurity breaches occur.
What is that one aspect that keeps you up at night?
We are much more exposed than before.
This is our podcast.
Can provide great customer service in a secure way.
That is just like spot on.
Cybersecurity today is out of control.
I believe infinite innovation.
The unknown risk is what's so important there.
Understanding the context is a totally different thing altogether.
Excellent information.
Where we talk to business leaders about cybersecurity, data management, and advanced digital solutions to provide strategies to increase the profitability of your company.
Thanks for everything, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Hello, everyone. My name is Maurice Hamilton, and welcome to the podcast that we label Where Humanity Meets Technology. We meet with different business leaders, executives out there, industry experts, and have conversations about how they can actually, or people in the industry can actually use technology for the betterment of their organizations and to actually produce more productivity for the people and actually provide better and greater security. Again, my name is Maurice Hamilton. I'm your host. And today we have a special guest. I say a special guest because I've known Ron Harris here, who's on the podcast with us for, Ron, what did you say? Probably 2-3 decades? A good.
Oh, it's about 3 now.
About 3. Oh, that's amazing. About 30 years now. So, so we go way back in our days working for an organization, and Ron was actually head of the director of logistics there, and now he's actually this man. I'll let him introduce his credentials in a few seconds here, but I'm very happy and very proud to say that he actually hosts the one of the highest levels that you can actually have, the CISSP level certification. So we're really happy with that. So Ron, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Maurice. Hello, everybody. Ron Harris. And yes, I am a cybersecurity specialist. My current role is a virtual CISO. So I actually provide services for clients on a day-to-day basis, advising them on different aspects of security, best practice, helping them respond to incidents, helping them build out their business continuity plans, pretty much advise them on any topics related to cybersecurity. And yes, I do hold my CISSP, which I obtained through ISE². And I've been interested and really excited about security for most of my career in technology. So thanks, Maurice, for having me today.
You're more than welcome. I'm really happy to have this conversation because today we're going to actually go a little bit deeper into the weeds. And we're going to talk about some of the best practices that you and I have seen in many industries, many years of being in this industry. And we go way back in the days when we actually had floppy disk and 3.5-inch hard disk and regular hard drives. And really didn't have to worry a lot about cybersecurity threats back in those days. But we became quickly aware that anybody that has a network hooked up, if you're hooked up to a network, you're vulnerable to and susceptible to some kind of cyber attack. So I like to start the conversation off and really just, and I want to be really frank in this conversation because I run across a lot of clients as you do too. And just talk about best practices. And when we talk about best practices, we know that people should definitely have their basic framework in place, and that could be the antiviruses, but it's a lot more to that. Let's talk about some of the best practices that clients really, really need to make sure that they actually have in place when they're talking about cybersecurity, and that would be the most effective. And one other thing I say to that, I don't think anybody, and you can probably agree with me, that nobody could be 100% safe from any kind of attack that may happen out there. Unless you're not connected to the network and you have your hard drive and you carry it with you every place you go, your chance of you actually being attacked is not if you're going to be attacked, it's when. So Ron, what would you say when it comes to like best practices and building out that framework that the CISO should actually and the executive should have in place?
Yeah, Maurice, that's a good starting point. It's not will I be attacked or hacked, it's when and how. And that gets overlooked because if you start with it's a matter of time, somebody will find a way in. They only have to get lucky once. You have to be lucky all the time. So when you're looking at best practice, what gets overlooked, just to start with the general things, are just administrative controls. A lot of companies think I got to spend a lot of money on technology, which eventually you will need to invest in the technical controls. But the start really starts with administrative controls, policies and procedures, and taking the time to map out your assets, making sure you have good asset inventory management programs, and you know what devices you're giving out, make sure that you start with simple things like a standard image, making sure that image is built to be hardened and secured. When we deploy this image to our user devices, we know that we disable ports and applications can't be installed that's not authorized. Those are some really basic types of administrative and technical controls that really doesn't cost a lot of money to implement. So I've seen starting with that first will help reduce the attack surface, as they like to say, because attackers are always looking for weaknesses in your network, and also users. That's the biggest landscape for let's attack the users now. You know, if we can't get past your technical controls, we'll just get somebody to let us in. And just like with physical security controls. So security awareness training is a big deal now. Every company should have that. They should be constantly training their users, having them do mandatory trainings, and then doing phishing campaigns. You know, yeah, and there's a lot of tools and software programs out there that will assist with that, and then reward people for following the best practice and identifying potential security threats. But yeah, I definitely say starting with that is first, and then you can get into making sure when the network's being configured, a device, anything that you're putting in your environment, follow the best practice from a security viewpoint, not just let's get it to work and keep the lights on. Let's make sure that we're configuring this in a secured manner, because a lot of times that gets overlooked. Like you said earlier, we're old school, you know, and in the beginning it was just make it connect and make it work. And then we started focusing on security. Today, you need to think security first. So that's my recommendation for the start.
Well, Ron, that's a lot of great information there. And you gave me about 8 or 9 bullet points so we can deep dive into. But you mentioned the first thing you said was PMP, policies and procedures. And I think that actually essentially builds up the framework. And so we actually have clients out there looking for PMP, and I suggest that people should probably look at CMMC, depending on what kind of industry they're in, but follow the NIST standards. And there's a bunch of different methods that you can use that's actually proven out there to build that framework with the policies and procedures. And then once you build those policies and procedures, I think it's essential that you have people that monitor it, that make sure that everybody's adhering to the policies and procedures, and then you test it. So what do you think about when you talk about PMP, how important that is to actually build those out?
Yeah, and you named some of the top ones, and these aren't things you need to really pay for. I mean, you could pay someone to come in and help you build out these policies and do the assessments, but these are frameworks that are available online. I mean, I like the CIS controls. They about 18 or 19 just critical controls that are put together to give you like a in-depth look of what's a best practice to follow for your entire environment, not just parts of your environment. And if you're skilled enough or you're comfortable enough, you can walk through those controls with your team and really get a good baseline of where you are in your environment. And then you could just track the maturity of that over time. That gives you a way to look at the whole picture at one point in time. And then you can start to prioritize what I need to focus on based on how big of a risk it is to your business.
Excellent, excellent. And I was thinking about when you were saying that a situation that affected pretty much half of America back in 2017. I think it's 2016 it happened, but people didn't really know what was going on until 2017 with the Equifax. I mean, Equifax, it has all of our private information there, and they had a pretty robust security. I mean, they're huge. They had a pretty robust security plan in place for it, but then they didn't do the patching. And one particular Apache server didn't have that patch on it. And then, like you said, you mentioned it earlier, you said that they have to just be right once. And the hackers and the bad guys will actually go out there and they'll keep testing, try to get into whatever they can until they find one that's going to work. And then once they get there, these guys aren't, from my experience, you can probably elaborate a little bit more about this. They aren't the guys where say, oh, we'll do everything in one day. They're slow, they're methodical, they're very intelligent as to what they do and how they do it, where you can't even see it. They can actually go back out there and scrub the logs, so you can't even see that information unless you're looking for it. So what do you think about that? Even with the bigger corporations, I think that they're probably more susceptible to having these attacks because it happens probably every single day. And when you see these companies forget the importance of just doing the patchwork and testing that, a security analyst once should be doing that all day long. What do you think? What are your thoughts about that?
No, that's spot on. I mean, patching, you should have a cadence for that. Like that should be scheduled and audited, and you should stay on top of that. That's the first, technically the most basic first line of defense. You have to patch. You get different excuses. Well, we can't patch this server because of this version is running and this application is not compatible, and and we patch, but we wait until we know the patches are not going to cause other issues. So most smaller companies, they don't have a test environment. Larger companies should. And it just comes back down to having the right network and set up so that you can test things first and then implement them into your environment. And if you don't have that, there are much more affordable ways to do that in today's time than back in the day. Like you can use VMware and cloud to help build your test environment. So those excuses are no longer, valid. Like I don't have a test environment. I don't want to risk compatibility issues. You have to, because if you don't start pushing the limits a little bit of your networking team and making sure they stay on top of these things, you're going to get hit with either zero-day attack, which can happen regardless of patching. But a lot of those attacks that clients think are zero-day, they were probably able to be mitigated by a patch if you just didn't do it. Like Log4j is still being found on networks as we test our client's environment. And that's been around for a few years now, and it's still, showing up. So patching is definitely huge. It's got to get done. You have to.
Wow. And it sounds like when you actually consult with your clients, you actually emphasize that with them, saying you have to do this as a regular cadence to make sure you can prevent something from happening. Okay.
Yeah, and if they have an MSP providing them IT services, then we will connect with them and talk to them about it and make sure they understand, because we will deploy tools on the devices and agents that will check for that. And when you do your vulnerability scans in an environment, that's the first thing that's going to show up is things that need to be patched. You would be amazed at how long it takes to get an organization to actually, once we've even done a penetration test and we've done an assessment and we've implemented the tools and we're showing them vulnerability reports, it still takes months, if not years, to get everything patched and updated. And it's very concerning because their IT team will respond to us like this: well, it's okay, it's not public facing server. So they think that makes it secure. That's okay, it's not public facing. And like, yeah, most servers aren't public facing. That's not going to protect you. They're going to get past your defense. They're going to get into your environment, maybe with some basic user account, and then they're going to use that vulnerability to elevate their permissions. And that's what matters. So it's speaking with the networking team and whoever is running their IT. You have to be really honest with that person and say, okay, I get what you think it will protect you, but let's really talk about how you can be attacked. And once you explain to them how the attack is executed, then they can connect the dots, because they understand that piece of the steps of the recon and the attack, how they're going to execute the attack. Then the networking engineer will then start to get on board.
Well, you said something, another key thing there. You said sometimes they'll get in and they may have like basic user rights, but they figure out how to give themselves admin rights so they can actually go back out there and have control over C to C, so they can actually do that,
Yeah, Active Directory, when I started learning how to pen test, because I like to know how it's done, even if I'm not doing that, every day. I was amazed at how vulnerable Active Directory is. It doesn't matter if your servers are patched and updated. It does matter a little bit, but there are PowerShell tools and commands that you can execute that will allow you to dump hashes and crack those offline, get passwords, and all you need is one person to create a weak password or them to use default credentials, default admin accounts. I mean, it's the amount of things we still discover today is just amazing. People still putting passwords in documents, emailing them to people, saving them on in a shared folder on the file server. It's amazing. I didn't think I would see as many common missteps as I've seen in the last year.
Wow. And you brought up another really critical, and this is one of my passions there, although I'm not certified to do anything like this. And we could talk about threat intelligence, but let's talk about what you just said there. And it's amazing that you said you find what you find. So we can talk about the concept of how important this is with a red team, a blue team, and then having a purple team. Can you actually explain to our audience what is a red team, what is a blue team, what is a purple team and how these are so critical for organizations?
Yeah, if I start with the blue team, they're the analysts. They're the ones that's monitoring the network. They're the ones that have access to your SIM. They're looking at every tool that's feeding them information about what's happening on the network that could be seen as malicious or suspicious behavior. They're the team that's most likely going to respond first to an incident and verify if it's actually, okay, this was expected, or no, we didn't expect this user to be logging in from Russia. Shut down the account, lock out the account, do everything we can to protect the network. And then they'll help with the investigation as well. So they need to go in and they need to let's see how far this user was able to penetrate in the network. What did they have access to? And it takes you back to making sure you can track those things. You need a SIM, you need these tools so that you can see what the actual digital footprint looks like. Okay, where did they go? What files did they access? But if you don't have those things in place with good managing your software and your data, it's going to be very hard to do those investigations. So that's the blue team. And then the red team, they're going to be the ones doing the pen testing. They're the ones that's doing the white hat hacking, and they're the ones coming in and seeing how deep they can get into your environment, trying all types of social engineering techniques and simple things as, just leave a key fob in your environment, see if someone plugs into a machine, all types of, attempts to get people to click on phishing emails and things like that. But it's very interesting how many types of attacks they can launch. And then the combination of the two is where you get the purple team. It's like having the ability to work together and test each other's environment, in situations where your pen testers will actually launch an attack and see if your blue team can catch it. And then they'll work together to tune your monitoring device tools and make sure that, why didn't we detect that right away? And then they'll go in and update signatures in the tool so that it knows what to look for and starts to, basically improve the AI that's built in some of these tools. So that's how I've seen the value of the three types of teams.
So you definitely say that's definitely critical for the organization to do that, have that kind of team in place to make sure that they're being, and again, like we said before, we said it 2 or 3 times already, you can't prevent everything from happening, but you can sure go ahead and lock your systems down as much as possible to make to greatly reduce the risk.
Yes, and that's the key. Reduce the risk and be able to recover faster from the damage. And you need those teams in place to assist with that. If you don't have an incident response team, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble trying to recover from a security event.
Yep. And let's talk about that for a few seconds. When we talk about the incident response team, and that's the team that you put together. So yeah, and actually, when I think about the incident, you can probably elaborate a lot more on this than I can. And you think about the incident response, you have the security level, like an analyst one, saying, hey, this is not normal. I just identify something that's not normal. Let me check my playbook here and say, here's what this is right. Give it over to a security analyst too. That person goes out there and takes a look at it and say, okay, let me see if I can try to remediate this. And by that time we look at it and say, we got something bigger that's going on here. So it actually goes up the chain, and eventually you find out, like in that Equifax example I gave, and there's so many other ones, but let's stick with that Equifax one, that by the time it gets to upper management, say, we just found out that somebody's been ciphering our data there in very small megabytes of information over like the last X amount of months. I think like 7, 8, 9 months. It was a long period of time. And then by that time you have to have that incident response team, because you got to respond to the people, your customers, your employees. You got to respond to the government. There's so many different people. So let's talk about that again. When you talk about that incident response team, how critical and how crucial is that for an organization to have that in place?
Yeah, it's probably the most critical team you need if a cybersecurity event happens. If you don't have a team to assist with that, you're going to find yourself in a lot of trouble, especially if it's privacy data. Now you're not going to be able to adhere to any of the regulations around that and respond to the community in time and get information out. And then when it's time to do forensics and investigations, you're not going to have trained, experienced people that can assist with that. So that just opens the door for a lot of other, issues that you can face, a lot of penalties and violations because you don't have the right people in place. And a lot of companies will outsource that, which is a great idea. If you don't have someone in-house, you need to outsource it. But you can't wait until an event happens and then decide, oh, let's find a company that can come in and do our incident response, because they're not